Hey Katie,
Hey.
it's so nice to meet up with you today on Treffpunkt Klassik.
Yeah, it's great to meet with you.
We're here in Salzburg, Austria, and wow, this is such a beautiful view.
I know, isn't it? This is one of my favorite views.
Tell me what we're looking at right now.
Well, we are looking at the Altstadt of Salzburg, so the old town. And on the left is the Neustadt. And we are on a bridge over the Salzburg River. And the Salzburg runs directly through the city and actually also forms the border with Bavaria.
So we're pretty close to Germany?
That's right. We're only about 3 miles from the border.
A pretty famous composer was also born here.
That's right. That was Mr. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
And I heard you're giving a concert soon?
I have a concert here on the 18th.
Salzburg is a pretty famous tourist destination.
In addition to being the home of Mozart, it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And so people come from everywhere to enjoy the beautiful Baroque architecture and the medieval buildings, and of course, just soak up the atmosphere.
I even heard people say that it's the Rome of the North.
That's right.
You've been here a pretty long time now. How would you describe Salzburg in 3 words?
I would say charming, exquisite, and inspiring.
Do you also know something about the history? Like, for example, where did it get its name from?
Salzburg actually comes from the word Salz, which is salt in German, and Burg, which is castle, so it means salt castle. And it got this name because this was originally a salt mining area, and that's also why the Salzach starts also with the word Salz.
Is it true that a lot of Americans know this place because of a very famous movie?
Yes, it is. That's The Sound of Music.
I've heard from that. It's funny though. In spite of being filmed here, the movie was never particularly popular in Austria.
I know, it's funny.
Speaking of the sound of music, Salzburg has always been a really important city of music.
That's right. Actually, the first opera performance north of the Alps took place here in the 1600s. And in the 1700s, of course, Mozart was here. And today, there is the famous Salzburg Festival, which is one of the world's most famous classical music festivals.
Yes, that's true. The Salzburg Festival has been around for a long time. So, where are we right now?
We are in the Ghetto Casa, and this is the most famous shopping street in Salzburg.
Do you also know something about the history?
Actually, it was a shopping street all the way back in the 1200s because it was used as a trade route throughout the city. And it's also special because of all these beautiful wrought iron signs that you see. And for these kind of passageways where you can get through to the other side.
So, I heard that Mozart was also born here.
That's right, he was born on Ghetto Casa number 9.
So, this is Getreidegasse number 9, I guess.
Yep, that's right. And this is where Mozart was born, in this house on the 3rd floor in January 27th, 1756. But actually, in those days, it was known as the Hagenauer House on the fish market.
Why is that?
Well, because when you go through to the other side, it opens up to a fish market.
And there's a sign. Do you know what it says?
Yeah, it says this is Mozart's birth house in the Mozart Museum. And in this house was Wolfgang Amadé Mozart born on January 27th, 1756.
Because now I see Wolfgang Amadé Mozart. I thought he was called Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Well, actually, he had a very long, complicated name. His full name was Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart.
That's quite a name. But what about Amadeus?
Amadeus is actually the Latin translation of Theophilus. Mozart preferred to use the Latin translation. And actually, when he signed his name, he didn't put all those names in it. He simply signed as Wolfgang Amadé. He used the name Amadeus only when he was being funny.
Oh, and with all these names, did he also have a nickname?
He did, yes. And you saw it probably in the movie Amadeus. Everybody called him Wolfie, and that was really his nickname.
That's hilarious. So, do you also know how long he lived there in this house?
He actually lived there for 17 years.
That's a long time. And I heard a story that he was proposing to Marie Antoinette. Is that true?
That is true, actually. He was in Vienna or just outside of Vienna at the Habsburg summer residence, and Marie Antoinette was there too, and they were both kids at the time, so of course she wasn't the Queen of France yet. But he slipped on the floor, and she helped him up, and so when he got up, then he proposed marriage to her.
So we're now at Fürst's. I bet they have a lot of Mozart chocolates too.
They do, actually. This is where the original Mozart Kugel were made.
And what are Mozart Kugel?
Well, Kugel is the German word for ball, and it's a Mozart ball.
And what are they made of?
They are a mixture of marzipan and pistachio and nougat and dark chocolate.
So there's also really beautiful coffee over there.
This is actually one of the most famous coffee houses in Salzburg.
Do you know something about it?
Yeah, it was founded by a man named Carl Tomaselli, and his father was a tenor and was a good friend of the Mozarts. And he actually played music with Mozart's father and his sister.
That's cool. I bet they must have had great conversations sitting right here.
Yeah, I think so. And what's also interesting is that Mozart's wife, Constanze, lived upstairs in the same building after Mozart passed away.
Constanze did a lot to preserve the memory of Mozart.
She did, yeah. When Mozart died, she organized a lot of concerts of his music, and she also worked hard to get some of his compositions published. And in addition to that, along with her second husband, she wrote a book on Mozart.
But I also heard that Mozart's father didn't like her, did he?
No, he didn't actually. Mozart's father was in some ways a very progressive guy, but in other ways very conservative. And he wanted both of his kids to become part of the nobility. And so he was really disappointed when Mozart decided to marry for love instead of position.
Constanze was quite a talented singer, I guess.
She was, yeah. She was a very talented soprano, and she actually inspired a lot of his works.
Did he also write for her?
He did. He wrote the soprano part of his great C minor Mass for her, and scholars think that it was actually a statement of love for her. And probably she was also the inspiration for the soprano part of the Magic Flute. And in addition to that, she also influenced him to write more contrapuntal music because she fell in love with the music of Bach and with fugues. And so actually one of the pieces that I'm going to play on my concert here was inspired by Constanze. We are now in the Residenzplatz. And that is called the Residenzplatz because this building is the old residence, and on the other side we have the new residence. And this was the palace of the archbishops of Salzburg.
And what about the church?
This church is the famous Salzburger Dome, and which in English is the Salzburg Cathedral.
Do you think Mozart ever went to this church?
Well, actually Mozart was baptized in this church, and the baptismal font that he was baptized in is actually still in the church.
That's cool. I think I recognize this statue.
Yes, this is the famous Mozart statue.
When was this monument erected?
It was erected in 1842, and there was a big celebration when it was put up, and Mozart's sons as well as King Ludwig of Bavaria were actually here for the celebration.
I've heard King Ludwig loved art and music, didn't he?
He really did, and he actually donated the marble for the statue, and so he was a big patron of this statue.
So this big square where we are at right now is called the Mozartplatz, right?
That's exactly right. And it's also an interesting fact that when they were preparing the foundation for this statue, they discovered a marble floor on which was written, "Here lies happiness, let no evil in."
So now we're at the Mozartsteg, so there's even a bridge named after Mozart.
That's right. I told you everything is named after Mozart in this town.
That's true. Salzburg, the mountains. There's even a castle on the hill.
Yeah, that's the famous fortress of Salzburg. That's one of Salzburg's most famous buildings. It's a medieval fortress. So now we're going to the new part of the city, the Neustadt. And Mozart also lived there after he moved away from his house at the Ghetto Casa.
And I guess this is Mozart's Wohnhaus then?
You got it. This is the Wohnhaus, yes. And actually, in those days, it was called the Tanzmeisterhaus.
And it belongs to the Stiftung of Mozarteum.
It does. That's the International Mozart Foundation, and they do everything they can to promote research and preservation of Mozart's works and life.
So another thing in Salzburg called Mozart.
Exactly.
And I guess he also didn't live that much in this house?
That's probably right, because by this time he was really traveling a lot.
So how much did Mozart actually travel?
He lived to be 35 years old, and in those 35 years he was actually on the road for more than 10 of them.
Oh, that's a lot. So he must have really gone far away.
He did, actually. He traveled all through Austria and Germany and France and Italy and Prague, and he went even as far as London. And it doesn't seem maybe like that far nowadays, but in those days it was really a long ways.
And especially because traveling was much harder back then.
Exactly, because the main means of transportation was a horse and carriage.
Especially in winter, this must have been so cold.
It was unbelievably cold, I think, and it took so long because, like nowadays, to get from Salzburg to Vienna, it takes about 2.5 hours, but in those days it took nearly a week. And if you can imagine being out in that cold, damp, carriage all that time, he got sick a lot, and probably because he got sick so much as a child, he was always, small and frail his whole life.
Do you know how tall he was?
Yeah, he was just a little bit over 150 centimeters, which is just 5 foot tall. So he was not a real big guy.
And due to the fact that he was Austrian, I bet his favorite food was schnitzel.
No, actually it wasn't. He liked sauerkraut with a Leberknödel.
Oh, what's that?
That is a liver dumpling. And it's actually also a very famous dish here in Salzburg.
It sounds delicious. And I guess he probably washed it down with a beer, since there are so many famous beers in Austria.
Yeah, that's very possibly the case. Actually, back in 1492, the first brewery was opened here in Salzburg, and that was the Stiegl brewery.
Yeah, I've heard from it.
Now, it's great beer. I can highly recommend it.
Oh wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, no, this is so beautiful. This is the Mirabelle Garden. And over here is the Mirabell Palace, which we're seeing from the side. And this is actually the building where I will give my concert on the 18th.
Did Mozart ever play here?
He did. He actually played here on many occasions.
And how does it feel to play in the same hall as Mozart did?
It's amazing and it's inspiring.
Well, people say listening to Mozart makes you smarter, don't they?
They do say that. And back in 1993, they coined the term the Mozart effect. And this claimed that when people listened to Mozart, their IQ went up. So they actually got temporarily smarter.
Interesting.
It is.
And to get back to a concert, so what are you going to play?
I am playing actually a program of all Mozart.
That sounds like a great program, and I can't wait to hear the concert and see inside the Schloss Mirabell.
I hope that you will enjoy it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.